Back in the barn. Raining today. We're kind of due for some rain here. Don't need that. A little bit of house cleaning, if you will, to finish up on my last couple of Trust the Guide episodes. So Dave and Michelle, the one where I had the grizzly bear kind of somewhat charge, whatever you want to call it, kind of stopped last minute. So where I was talking about the bear that was charged after a charge, and I yelled at it and it stood up on its hind feet and it's kind of, trying to intimidate me, and then Michelle was screaming. So we didn't talk about that, what was going on, until the very end of the hunt. So we never did get a sheep on that one. We got on a big ram, and he crossed down the valley and went up another mountain, and we kind of chased after him. We got so close so many times, and then right at the end he was like 440 yards, and he had our wind, because when we had to go up the bottom, the wind was at our backs. Looking back at it now, I should have pulled out and then went after the ram the next day. But as it were, we didn't get a ram, got a couple of caribou. We actually passed up on a small ram, like a 7-year-old that was legal. But anyways, so the hunt is all over. We were sitting around camp. It was the last night. Planes were going to come pick up Dave and Michelle the next morning. And we were having a little toast. Dave had a bottle of vodka with him, and so we were having a drink. And then you're reminiscing about the hunt and all the things that went wrong and, went right and whatever. Just the whole experience. And then Dave made a comment about, I guess Michelle had a lot more confidence in you with that bear than I did. And I'm like, well, what? What are you talking about? He's like, well, didn't you hear Michelle screaming when that bear was standing up and you were yelling at it, pointing your pistol at it? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I say, yeah, I heard her screaming, but I didn't what was going on. And he said, oh, he goes, well, you're going to love this. So here when I am yelling, get out of here, bear, get out of here, bear. Well, that's the first Michelle knew anything was happening. So she had her pants around her ankles, and she stands up and she goes, look, Dave, a grizzly bear, get your camera. So she wanted Dave to take pictures of this bear that I'm at a standoff with. But Dave, he grabbed his pistol and was running over there to, shoot the bear if need be. But so yeah, we got a pretty good charge out of that. There I was about ready to get eaten by a bear, and all Michelle could think was that Dave needed to get his camera and get a picture of that thing. So I never did finish that up, so I wanted to clarify that. And then another thing, when I was talking about my dad, and how my dad his best advice for me was to just, it's like integrity was implied. I don't even think he ever really said that, but he just said, just work hard, and, people will take notice. And I don't remember it like verbatim, but basically that was it, is that work hard and opportunities will come. And so, throughout my message, I feel like I didn't summarize that very well when I was talking about my dad, and that ultimately, the lesson that he taught me, there was times where it was costing me the worldly values that I was paying attention to. It was costing me. It was costing me money, at least at the short term. And it was maybe it was probably costing me in some other ways, maybe advancement in my career. Career, I'm using the term loosely there. But in the long term, it certainly served me well. And that is just like following our Heavenly Father, is following His ways, His guidance, His precepts, is that it is going to cost us in the short term, and it is going to seem at times counterintuitive. But in the long haul, particularly when you're talking eternity, it's invaluable. And so that was ultimately, my point, that we just don't see things. God's ways aren't our ways. And so any bit of advice that we're going to get like that from our Father or in a person, oftentimes when we're in, when the Holy Spirit is leading us, and it's oftentimes not going to seem right. Our earthly minds, it's not going to seem right. And that's where consistent study of God's Word is so imperative. And that's how you develop discernment, And again, I'm repeating myself there. I mean, this is all things that I've said before, but I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I can't understate that, because I feel like much of that, like the discernment factor, like nobody ever put it in terms like that for me. And it took me 10 years. I mean, I went to church for half my life, and it's like nobody ever really said it that way, just broke it down into simple terms that I could understand. I can do, like, some ways I'm, relatively smart, some ways not at all. And the biggest thing that I struggle with is breaking things down into simple fashion. If you give me a mountain of things to do, I want to run away. But if I just have one thing to do that I can work at and do it to the best of my ability, that's kind of where I excel. And I think that's why I love the wilderness so much, and I have ever since that I was a kid, is just the hustle and bustle of life overwhelmed me, where I could get into the wilderness and just all that distraction kind of went away. Where am I going with this? I'm giving myself my own heap of junk to worry about here, but yeah. So I mean, this whole process here of ministering to others. I guess here's my point: is that's kind of why I feel like I need to share this, because to me, like religion, if you will, going to church, it's like almost like the more that I went, the more confused I got, and the more frustrated and empty I felt, because I was never being taught at my level. And there's a common phrase that God will always meet you where you're at. And I'm going to talk about that later. And I just feel like, for me, modern church and catechism, I got more out of Sunday school. Maybe that's a testament to my mentality and my intelligences. And we had this old preacher, I love him, Pastor Miller. Like, he would give this little Bible lesson to the kids. He'd have all the kids come up front, and he'd just talk to them. I mean, just like when I read the Bible, just the way I imagine Jesus talking to kids and people in general, is he just got up and just face to face and just spoke from the heart. He would usually do that for about 5 minutes, and I would get more out of that than I would the sermon. And I think that's just me. I just needed I needed it simplified. Just give me one thing, give me one takeaway, and then let me ingest that, and then let my body, my heart, my soul digest it. Man, that was pretty good. So anyways, what else do I got here that we're going to chat about? So I brought Scout. Come on, Scout. Come here. Come on. So I brought him up here to chase cats. So he's afraid of cats, but he loves to chase them. And I've been kind of busting on Scout's chops here lately. He's they call him a teddy bear, Bichon Frise Shih Tzu cross, and he's actually a really good dog. We got him a shock collar, and about once a month I put it on him just to remind him. So if I ever need him to come, I just go beep, 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 like I'm hitting the button on the shock collar. But he is turning into a really good, loyal dog. He loves to go out, and he's not real impressive to look at, but hey, neither am I. But he's turning into a pretty good boy. So today is my wife's anniversary, the old standard joke. 15 years we've been together. I talked about my wife last week, and I figured we'd do it a little bit this week. We are going to Doug Coulterman's cabin for a little weekend getaway here coming up. Just this coming weekend here, so by the time this is aired, we've already been on our way home. So the guy hunted with me, he's never lost. I don't know what episode it is, 11, 12, something like that. He's got a cabin in central Wisconsin, and he's very generous. My understanding, he lets a lot of people stay there, and he offered it to us, so we're going to take him up on that and then visit him and his girlfriend Mary, go up, take them out to dinner. And so I'm looking forward to a little getaway. It's been a while for us, raising kids and all that stuff. But yeah, 15 years of marriage. She probably should have left me a while back. And just looking back at it, holy smokes, does it go fast. And I'm sure I'm not telling anything any of you don't know, that the older you get, the faster they go. There's just no doubt about that. But I met my wife. She was a bartender at a local joint here just 2 miles down the road. And, I didn't come in very often, and she said that was one of the things that attracted her to me, that she didn't that I didn't come in often. I wasn't a regular. I wasn't smart enough to have any pickup lines, and so I never even tried because I knew she was way out of my league. And an attractive young bartender, you can imagine what that was like. I mean, everybody in the joint was hitting on her. And one day, I just started chatting with her. I was helping a buddy build a house like 100 miles away, came home on a Thursday night. And it was a restaurant, bar, grill, resort kind of a place. And it was late. I knew I didn't have any food in the refrigerator at my house, and so I stopped in there for supper, and there was like another couple at the end of the bar, and I just sat at the other end of the bar and ordered a cheeseburger, and we started talking, and she said, she's like, I always thought you were a toothless redneck. And so what the deal was, I got in a boat wreck and knocked out a bunch of teeth, fractured my jaw all the way across. Hope I haven't told this story before. I don't believe I have on here. And so I had to have a bone graft in my jaw and stuff. And so like a year and a half, I didn't have any lower teeth. And the doctor asked me, he's like, well, you want some false teeth? And I was like, nah, I'm fine, I can get by. Well, then eventually I got some implants, some implanted teeth. So when she said, man, I always thought you were a toothless redneck, I'm like, well, at that point I had teeth, obviously. And I said, well, you're right, I am a redneck, and I didn't have teeth for a while, and kind of gave her the story. So apparently women dig men with teeth, so that's kind of the moral of that little anecdote. And then when she saw one night, we closed down the bar, or everybody else left, and I went out. Maybe this was even like that first night, because I think I stayed there the whole time. Nobody else came in. We just stayed there till closing time and just chatting. And I remember we walked out, and I had an old truck. It was like 20 years old. This red Ford F-150 with probably like a fourth-hand ladder rack. See how wet my camera's getting there. Maybe I'll slide it a little closer. Getting a little rain on it. And like a fourth-hand ladder rack. It was a real piece of junk. It was just a work vehicle, and she checked that out when she walked out. She's like, awesome truck. She wasn't any too impressed, and but yeah, I don't know. I just was at this stage in life. I kind of got over my, it was a year or so after my depression, and it was just kind of to this freeing stage of life where I just kind of didn't try to hide from anything. I just kind of let things be me, let the cards fall where they may. And if I had any advice to young people and old people in relationships, is be honest. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And I think the only way to really get to that point sometimes is to just get burned, to get hurt, get in a low position in life, to humble yourself. Because the truth is going to come out anyway. And I think my wife and I think we were on our second date. And this is like 2 weeks after we met. She lived in Elmina, just a couple miles down the road. Yeah, I would say second, third date tops. I cooked her pizza at my house, and I think that was our second date. First date, we went to a Chinese joint. Maybe first date we went to a movie. Second date, I think we went to a Chinese joint, and then I think the third date, cooked her pizza at my house, and yeah, I knew I loved her, and her and I both knew we were going to get married at that point. So I took her out to Idaho after 3 months of dating. Went to Idaho where I'd guided hunters for a bunch of years, and we went horseback riding, so we had to fly into the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness. Steep, jagged mountains, rough country, and she'd done a little bit of horseback riding. And I had been doing it for many years, so I kind of took for granted, how narrow those trails are and how steep those mountains. And if anybody comment on this, if you've been to that country, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's trails, and they're like this wide, and a lot of times there's like rocks, trees, all over you, and you're in the middle fork of the Salmon River is where we were. And you look down, and at some points it's like a couple 100 feet. If you fall off the horse, you're dead. There's just no doubt about it. So we went there, and the outfitter, they were gracious to just host us there, and they had 2 lodges. They were 15 miles apart, and they had these new horses that had just bought from Canada, and they wanted them trailed up from one lodge, the lower Loon, up to the Middle Fork Lodge. And so, we were there to go horseback ride, and they're like, well, hey, why don't you, if you trail these horses up, and then you guys can stay at the Middle Fork Lodge. Beautiful place, 80 private acres in the middle of I think it's the largest or second largest wilderness area in the lower 48. And I'm like, cool, man. So we load all of our whatever we needed, our duffel, onto this one horse to pack it. And then we rode horses, and we start going down these trails. And of course, Stacia's in the rear, and she's on they're new horses. They've never been on these trails, so some of them are kind of spooky. Stacia's horse would lag behind and eat grass and then run to catch up. Stacia's a novice rider, and there she is on these cliffs, with this horse running to catch up. And she was getting pretty stressed out, I could tell. She let it be known. And then finally we get off. We were going down a hill. We were just going to walk, and it was after a spot where she was particularly scared, and she just breaks down and she just starts crying. She's just like, I have a daughter at home. Did you actually think this was going to be fun? And here I am with a ring in my pocket. The next day I was going to take her to the top of the mountain and then propose to her. And she just broke down. She's just like, I don't think I'm cut out to be with you. This is not me. Yeah, she had pair of pants on and a halter top, and I thought very much it was for her. She looked good. But a red one, I do remember. She had a baseball cap on that day, and she looked beautiful. But yeah, there she was crying. And so now we're like 3 or 4 miles from the one camp, and we've got like 11 to go. And I didn't want to disappoint my employer, but I didn't want this woman who I loved and wanted to marry to, turn around and walk away on me either. So I don't know how I did it. I pulled some sort of magic out of my hat, and the trail was a little bit better most of the way from there on. So we walked quite a bit. It took us 5 hours. Pretty long trail ride for a dude, We get to the Middle Fork Lodge, and then that night, we were done riding at that point. She let it be known. And so then that night we went. They had a hot tub and a pool. We go down there. We're drinking some champagne, and we're in the hot tub, and then lightning starts. It's raining, lightning starts, and then these elk come feeding down off the mountains. With the lightning, we just stayed right in the pool. And elk are feeding in the lawn, in the grass, all around us. as the lightning would flash, and then you'd just see the elk, and I mean, it was like magic, right? And so then all of a sudden, all the bad parts went away, and she's just like, man, this is incredible, you know? So I had her conned in to trying to go back up to the mountain the next day where I was going to propose, and I'm like, it's way better, nothing like it was, you know, the last trip. So we're hiking up, or riding the horses up the mountain, and there's like one place that's like reasonably steep. Seriously, the only place in the trail where it's like sketchy. Then her horse goes down, takes a step, and like just slips and goes down to its knee. Well, of course, like most horses, it's gonna just lunge to try to regain its feet right away. And so then that's what happened. And it was pretty steep off to the side. Stacia held on. She was a pretty good cowgirl about it. But then right there, she's like, nope, I'm done. You told me. And I'm like, and maybe that was like the first time where I just like really started to learn. Maybe I was like, she was already training me in as a husband, you know, to pick your battles. And I just realized, man, this isn't going to work. And she was kind of like a little bit teary-eyed, you know, because she was legitimately scared. I mean, she dug in her heels. She was done. And so at that point, I just got down on one knee and proposed to her, and she said yes. And there was a spring in her step the whole way back, because we weren't going up to the hill. There was no doubt about that. So she marched right on back, and yeah, we just had a magnificent time. We toured around. I think we went through Yellowstone. You know, we drove out there, and so we had like, I don't know, maybe like 9 days that we were out there all together. And so we just love that. Just love going on a road trip with no agenda, just kind of stay wherever. And I knew she was a keeper. We stayed in an Econo Lodge somewhere in South Dakota or North Dakota. I don't remember which, if we took 90 or 94 across. Got into this place, and it was like 11 at night. All we needed was a place to sleep. And I had no money. I wasn't going to impress her. That leads me to another story. We get in it, like the first place was like a Motel 6 we stopped at or something. And they didn't have any rooms. And then maybe we went to the Econo Lodge, and they had like a room. And I'm like, we'll take it. You know, we just wanted to go to bed. And so we get there, and the toilet is dirty. There's like swimmers in the toilet. And my wife's like, are you kidding me? You know? And I'm like, you want me to try to get a different room? She's like, no, it's okay. But I wasn't impressing her much. That was on the way out. But apparently there was something about me she liked well enough to say yes. So we get back home. It's kind of what a cheapskate that I was. My wife always teased me what a lousy tipper I was. I try to be a little better at that now, particularly now that I realize the value of a good tip is that I kind of survive on tips as well. But I didn't want to. So then after that, once we were dating and engaged, I was like, I wasn't going to like give her wild tips, because then it just seemed like it was disingenuous at that point. But so we're at the bar. I came in, had supper or whatever Friday, Saturday night, not long after we were engaged, and there was this old guy that I sat right next to him, in fact. He was probably, so Stacia and I were like 25, 26. And this old dude, probably like 50, I call him old. I mean, to me at the time, he's probably older than that, probably in his 50s. Well, he's kind of chatting with Stacia. I didn't say anything, she's got a job to do. He wasn't being like inappropriate or anything, but I mean, you could tell that he was trying to, I don't know, maybe make time with Stacia, but trying to get to know her well. And I'd seen the guy in there before. He had a cabin there. It's on a lake, and we'll get a lot of people from Minneapolis or the Twin Cities, Minnesota. So I just figured he was some old dude, city slicker there, whatever, nothing new. And then he was sitting there talking with her, and she gave him a drink, and she just came and she set a drink beside me, and we didn't even really exchange words because she was talking to him. That was fine. And then he's like, is that a ring on your finger? And she's like, well, yeah, it is. She said, I got engaged. And this guy, all of a sudden, he got fluffed up. And he's like, what? When did that happen? Oh, a couple weeks ago. And he's like, to who? He's like, the guy sitting right next to you. And he looks over at me and he just gives me this, dumbfounded look. And it was like that guy, you just shot him in the guts with birdshot or something. He just like that. And he goes to Stacia, he said, it was like he just sat there and wallowed and talked to himself for a while, and she's going about the bar serving people. And then as she comes back, he goes, you're lucky I'm handling this so well, to Stacia. And I'm like, what? I was starting to wonder if I was going to have to drag him off the bar stool or something, but apparently he and Stacia mentioned, he's like, he kind of talked to me for a while, and I kind of got the impression that he said he never really asked me out, but he was kind of implying at various times leading up to that. So apparently Stacia broke his heart. Well, so then come to find out that the dude drove a Hummer. This is when Hummers were new, and so I nicknamed him Hummer Boy. And then the one day we saw him running, really skinny, and he had really limp wrists flopping all over the place. And so to this day, Stacia and I, we kind of joke around about if we're ever doing, staying at an Econo Lodge with a poopy toilet. I said, this would have never happened if you'd have married Hummer Boy. And so that's kind of a standard joke around our house, and even our kids kind of caught on to it. Some would probably deem that inappropriate that we let our kids in on that story, but we think it's pretty funny. So anytime we see a Hummer, we can't help but think of that story. But I don't know. There's lots of good stories. My wife is a very strong lady. I think, as I've mentioned before, she's never once told me don't go. She's always been very supportive. The only promise she's ever made is just promise me you'll be safe. Do whatever you can do to be safe. She understands the inherent risks of what I do, and she just lets me be me. And she'd done that for a long time. And I kind of took that for granted many times for a number of years. And I probably was kind of selfish. I always, for the most part, kind of the financial burden rested on me. And, I thought that was good, particularly once we started having kids. We had Matea, who was 5 when I met Stacia. And then once Charlie and Frankie came about, we both agreed. It was kind of like month-to-month, paycheck-to-paycheck kind of living that we had. And there was, a lot of times where she was like, man, should I go back to work? And we're just like, man, it's just, we wanted to raise our own kids. We knew that was going to be valuable in the long haul. But in the short term, we had to sacrifice a lot. We lived pretty simple. There wasn't too much to go around. And you know what? Stacia loved it. And that was one of the things that I first really loved about her, is just the way she mothered Matea. She was firm but very loving. And I really recognized that she was an excellent mother. And outside of her personality and her outward beauty, when I just saw the heart that she had for Matea, and she was kind of a no-nonsense mom, but still loving. When Charlie and Frankie came about, and I was putting together some play set or something, it was so stupid, one of those things, made in China with a million different parts, and the directions made no sense and took hours. And I'm just like, man, I don't know if I'm cut out to be a dad. At the beginning, it sounded good. I'm going to build this for my daughter. And then about 3 hours later, I didn't think it was such a good idea anymore, But it was just a process of dying to myself. And that's what being a disciple of Jesus is the process of dying to yourself. And I remember about changing diapers, just always the smell of baby poop. It always smelled the exact same, and I'm just like, man, I'm not going to change diapers. There's no way I'm going to. I didn't know how to hold a baby at the start, and my wife's like, she said, that's all natural. It'll come. And by the time it was all said and done, if you're a parent, I know you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not, you might think this will sound weird, but I literally enjoyed changing the girls' diapers. I literally enjoyed it. I would, towards the end anyway, I would volunteer for it, I wouldn't say all the time, but very regularly, because I just remember them, their feet will be in the air and they just look up at you because you are their everything. You are their world, and they are 100% reliant on you to take care of them and to give to them what they can't do themselves. I mean, something comes alive inside of you, and I think for me that was like really the start of it was becoming a father. That really, it changed me, and I think it changes just about anybody as long as you're there. And that's what's, you talk about politics and that sort of thing, and I don't know if it was Lyndon Johnson or whatever, but when he started the government program to where if a woman has kids without a man in the home, the more kids she has, the more money she gets, as long as the man's never in the home. And so it incentivizes for people not to stay together, for couples not to be together, to have, children out of wedlock, but it breaks up the family unit. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where, I think politics is darn near a sham all the way around, but what my point is that the things that are going on in our governments, if you read the Bible at all, you'll see that much of things that are, particularly the things that are new and that are being passed in legislation, definitely a vast majority of those are contrary to the Word of God. The family unit is, that's a biblical thing. One man, one woman. The man is to be the head of the household, just as Christ is to the head of the church. And so now, we're seeing all these social problems, and the government's trying to fix them all. The government's creating them. The government really has no. I won't even go down that road, but that's my point. Is these men aren't there for their children, and they're not changing. I don't care who you are. I don't care how good of a Christian you are, or what your upbringing is like, and you have children and you're there for them, when you're there to nurture them, because that was the biggest difference between, me with Matea. She was 5 years old when I met her. So I wasn't there for those moments. We just don't have the same bond. Yes, Charlie and Frankie, they are my blood children, but perhaps more than anything, just to be there from step one. That's so powerful, to go through that transformation of someone needing you to take care of them. That can't help but spur a change in a person. And we started to recognize that as Charlie and Frankie got older, that they needed dad more and mom less. They didn't need the boob anymore. They didn't need the milk. They were ready for some solid food. And I think God created man and woman, and a mother is a nester. It's just totally natural for them to be more nurturing, loving, and compassionate. When the kids hurt themselves, they want to run to mom. When they want adventure, they want to go do something, or they need something done for them, they usually go to dad. When they want sympathy, they'll go to mom, but dad's a little more tough love. And I think that's kind of the natural order of things. Yeah, and to not have that family unit. I mean, I've recognized that in the time that I've been away from my kids, months at a time. I can see there's certain, and Stacia and I have talked about that, there's a certain element of dysfunction there that they need that strength of a father in the home. There's just no doubt about that. So I just pulled up some verses here, and so kind of my point of this one is for men to encourage them to be the head of your household, just as Christ is the head of the church. And so here's one, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Husbands, likewise dwell with them, your wives, with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Maybe one of the first episodes on this 3, 4, 5 months ago, part of the reason why I did this, and I talked about it a little bit, I maybe wasn't very clear, is that I felt it's not that my wife and I were like right on the brink of divorce or anything, but it was kind of like, in my mind, it was looming. It was there, and I dare say on our current trend, it was inevitable. And you see that a lot in people, they stay together for their kids, because their kids become their life. They worship their kids, they just take them, do everything for them, and they love them, and then they lose sight of one another. And that is definitely not the way it's supposed to be. I believe that a man is to love his wife, but more than his children. And in order to do that, I think, like I said before, is I needed to love God before all things. I think that's a pigeon. Scout! Beep, beep. Yeah, I think it's a pigeon. Every once in a while, you'll find some crazy stuff out here. Up here, a lot of coons and stuff. But, and I just recognized that I wasn't being the man, a husband and a man, biblically speaking. In the eyes of the world, I was probably doing okay. But biblically speaking, I was, at least to some degree, a fraud. And my wife, not like, she's no Bible scholar or anything, but my wife has her character, how would I say it? Her character and her personality very much aligns with the character of the biblical wife. I'm not trying to like put her on a pedestal, but I will say that like I don't think I know Stacia's never read the Bible cover to cover. She's read it very little. She's gone to church a little bit. She's kind of done the church stuff, confirmed and baptized as a kid, which I'm not. I don't believe in infant baptism. That's just me personally. I was actually rebaptized not long ago, because I definitely don't believe in it. Christening or something like that maybe, but when you decide to follow Christ, that is a big change. That's a big commitment. That is a death to the old self, and a new man is born. And I don't believe that it happens as a young person. So she hasn't been baptized as an adult, just as a child. And so we're at different stages on the mountain spiritually. And as I went to we traveled to these various events, where I'd speak. I wouldn't say that I was like put on a pedestal or anything like that, but that's not it at all. But I just knew that my wife knew me well enough, and the words that I was saying, and what I believed and what I was doing were two different things. And my wife is smart enough, my wife has enough grit and integrity that sooner or later, and she knows that, that I was human, and it's not like she ever really called me out on it or anything, but I just knew sooner or later that any window of hypocrisy that was going to blow open sooner or later. It was going to be like a crack in a door, and sooner or later, boom, it was going to blow open, and she was going to have enough of it. Because I kind of got comfortable, I would say, in my Christian walk, and I just kind of let things. Yeah, I just got comfortable. I didn't stick to it. I didn't keep trying to improve. I didn't stay in the Word the way I should. I would kind of go in like cycles. When bad things would happen, and when I needed God, boy, I'd be in the Word. But then my flesh would take over again, and I'd build confidence and pride, and then I'd usually hit a downward spiral. And I just knew that if I was going to, I use the word Bible thumping, kind of as I wouldn't say like a joke, but I mean, just basically it's the connotation. I think everybody will know what I'm saying, but if I was going to be preaching, if you will, or sharing my faith and trying to be some sort of example for other people and not be an example for my wife and my unborn child, or my children, different story, that she was, no woman should put up with that. And my wife is the kind of person that she's very patient, very loving, but when she's done, she's done. She'll put up with anything for a long time, but I knew that if I ever pushed her over past her breaking point, she may never come back. And I'm here to say it was scary. I've never rewatched any one of these episodes, but I would bet that you could probably see the fear in me when I said that. Whatever episode that was, where I just said, I realize that I have to love God before all things, more than my wife, more than my children, if my wife and I are going to stay married. I honestly, I didn't know if that was going to work. I truly didn't. And I mean, I'm not saying that my wife and I have arrived in our personal relationship, but I will say our marriage is better than it's ever been. And I would say, by and large, we've had a pretty good marriage. The last year up until that point, through the house building stage, and, it was pretty tense. We just financially, things were really tight. The COVID stuff happened. Just that financial strain was very much real. And that wasn't even the biggest thing. The biggest thing is I was such a dick to my wife and my kids. I was just under so much stress, and as we all know, is when you're stressed out, you usually take it out on the people that love you the most, because you know that they love you and they'll put up with your junk. And my wife tells me that pretty regular now. Is she just like, you're so much nicer. I mean, nice is okay. I mean, it's good. It's good. But I just recognized that I had to change. That I had to change. And I think this, as a husband and as a father and just as a human being on this earth, I don't know. I mean, generally we all just follow the examples that we've had, and even then you can't rely on examples of people wholeheartedly 100%, because they're imperfect people. That's never going to be the end all. Yeah, you can get some good advice, don't get me wrong, but I knew I needed this as a husband and as a father, and it's served me very well the more that I trust it. So I'll go through a few others of these, a few more that I found here. Talk about, here's one. And I'd say this is very true. If you're a young buck, Proverbs 31, or anybody for that age, Proverbs 31 verse 10, Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. That is absolutely right. I mean, there's nothing more valuable to me than on this earth than my wife and my kids. Nothing. I mean, her love, and to have someone that you are one flesh with, that knows everything about you inside and out, and to be completely honest and completely vulnerable with that person, and to have a deep level of trust, a wholehearted trust and love. You know, I'm still exploring that. I'm not going to say that I've got it all figured out, but there is nothing more valuable than that. And I'd say the more vulnerable that we get, we never had too much issue with that. And I think that's because we both had been through enough, had made enough mistakes in our past that we were just an open book for one another, and that, I'd say, maybe that's above everything else. That's been the most important thing, the glue in our relationship. Proverbs 16 verse 9, we're talking about, people say how God meets you where you are. A man's heart plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. I definitely believe that Jesus, be strong and courageous. Joshua 1:9, I think, be strong and courageous. God is with you wherever you go. I definitely believe that's true, that Jesus will meet you wherever you are. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. In Psalms 139, verse 10 through whatever we go through. Even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. With praise I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, that my soul knows very well, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you, when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God! How great is the sum of them! If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God! The only way to know our Creator's thoughts is to get to know Him and who He wants us to be, because He gives us free will. And life is faith to faith. And you have to I don't know how, when I look back at my life, it was like I was lost, but now I'm found. I don't have everything figured out, don't get me wrong, but that old adage, it's like you're stumbling around in the darkness. If you don't have the light, if you don't have the truth, if you don't have God's word, you will always be stumbling around in the dark, looking for the lights. Well, most people, the idea is to find the light switch, but most people just stumble around and ignore the light switch. They see it there, but they don't bother with it. They just stumble around in the darkness and stub their toes all the way along. And I didn't read verse 7 here. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take my wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. Or in another verse it says, your hand shall guide me. God does meet us wherever we are. And as a husband, as one of the donkeys, as a husband and as a father, we are called to lead our wife and lead our children in their spiritual journey. And that's not what we see a lot in church nowadays. Very often the wife is dragging the man, or oftentimes the man doesn't go, and then the kids are there. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And so we are, just as God meets us wherever we are to meet our wives and our children wherever they are. And that's why I think it was so imperative for me that where my wife was, and maybe I think we all are. Jesus definitely was. Like I said a million times before, he had no place for hypocrites. And I knew that for my wife to join me on this spiritual journey, I had to walk the walk. I needed to have a solid understanding of how to work my way up the mountain before she was going to want to follow me. She wasn't going to follow me on some narrow little trail that I didn't know the way, that if we took one misstep, we were going to fall off into the middle fork of the Salmon River. She wanted a guide who knew a better way, if that makes sense. She wanted to have total and utter confidence in me, more confidence than she had in me when we were riding those trails. And I think at this point I'm building, probably still in that trust building phase for her. And with my children, it's no different. The things that they're going through, and all children that are going through in this day and age, holy smokes, you better be on top of your game as a spiritual leader of your family if you're going to have any chance at, leading your children through the narrow gate. I mean, boy, there's a lot of hard lessons, scary. There's so much evil out there for our kids that they have access to. I mean, right now it's more important than ever that we as parents, fathers, can give our children some a strong spiritual upbringing. Utmost important. I think that almost goes without saying. And I'll end with these here. To end in love. Proverbs 3, verses 3 and 4. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Another version, I think it's the NIV, says, let not love and faithfulness ever leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor on high esteem in the sight of God and man. Mercy and truth. Love and faithfulness. So that we will find high esteem in the sight of God and man. That's one of those things that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of consistency. And again, that's one thing that's so true. Especially the people that know you the most. And that's one thing that my dad taught me with integrity, just consistency, to do what you say you're going to do every single time. That's getting harder and harder to come by. And if you don't have truth, definitely, consistency, love, and faithfulness, people are going to smell that a mile away. And people aren't going to follow that. They're not going to believe in that. And lastly, from John chapter 15, verse 12. This is Jesus speaking. Yeah, we'll read verse 11 too. Yeah, we'll read 9 through 12. As the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. That pretty much sums it up right there, to love one another as I have loved you. And that's something that I'm still working on, to love others, and even my family and my children, and to die for self, to self, because that's literally what Jesus did for us. He loved us so much that he to the point of death, and that's ultimately what we're called to do. Not like a physical death, but our own wants and desires, particularly as a husband, are to take a back seat to the needs and the well-being of our wives and children. And we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. So I mean, but I think it's got to start in the home. And I mean, if we're going to have any kind of change, hope to turn things around in this, in our society, in our world today, we're going to have real change in our home, because if our kids and our spouses, if they see hypocrisy, they're not going to believe in that. That's not going to take any root in them. They need consistency. It needs to be there 100% of the time without fail. It has to be, our foundation has to be on the rock. And right now, everything you see in our world today is founded on the sand. It's all a fallacy. It's just all about the now, and it's all about me. And so, being a Christian, if you're in with culture at all right now, a Christian has to be counterculture, almost without fail. I mean, in any regard of any significance, anyways. You basically, there's no other way to slice it. And to get back to it, one of the comments that I read about last week, he said, politics shouldn't be a part of, some people said it should, and, it's probably like misunderstanding the one guy that said that it shouldn't, it's not a part of Christianity or following Jesus. And I kind of get what he was saying. But what my point is the reason why I'm saying this, I want people to kind of recognize the need to get into God's Word, and the need to be following Jesus is to gain that discernment, to see that, so you can more readily identify the evil that is at play in people everywhere, but particularly in our government and these laws that are being passed down, to recognize where they're coming from. I think we all need that. I hope that made sense. But that's just that's why I feel like it's so important, is you get so frustrated with what's going on in the world, and we have to recognize that, Jesus is talking about joy, here, and he knew he was going to be crucified. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. He knew that we were going to have tribulations and trials in this life, and we always will. That's always been the case. Right now, we've had it pretty good for a pretty good while there, and right now there's just a lot of things looming that I think, are concerning, and I think for me and for a lot of people, you got to wonder, hey, what should I be doing here? I don't want to just lay back and take it, but trying to figure out what is the best thing that I can be doing. And I think right now the first step for all of us is to minister and to be the Christ, the head of our homes as men. That is my challenge. That is my message, to love your family the way God has loved us. Give them mercy and unmerited favor. So my challenge for all the men out there particularly is spend this next week doing things for your wife, for your kids. Ignore the things that you want to do. And do that for a week, do that for a month, do that for a couple of months. Not entirely, not saying you can't, do your thing. But, take out the trash and all those silly things that, and do it consistently. Do it regularly. Meet your wife and your kids where they are and do things that you know that they're going to appreciate, and just die to yourself a little bit more. I suppose I probably got to do that too now. And then see what happens. See the change that it makes. And, instead of watching football or, sports or whatever, watch something as a family, do something as a family, whatever it may be, and then just give them your undivided attention and be the rock for them. That's my challenge, and that's my ultimate message. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this beautiful day, Lord. I thank you for the guests that we had here this last weekend. I thank you for my health. Thank you for my wife, 15 years of marriage that you've blessed me with. I thank you for your mercy, that you've been patient and kind, and you've always met me where I'm at, and you've never left me, you've never forsaken me. You have always been there. When I was seeking you, you were always at the door. You were always ready for me to invite you in, Lord. And I ask that you be there for continue, as you promise. You promise that you will always be there for any of us, that you will always be at the door. We invite you in, Lord. I just ask that you knock. You knock loudly in your still small voice. Wake more people up. And gather those that you knew in the womb, and bring us together and unite us, Lord. And I'd ask for continued mercy on your people, and I just ask that you have a blessing, mercy and special blessing for those who are going through struggles in leading their family and discerning your ways and navigating through the world, that are feeling overwhelmed, Lord, because I've certainly been there, and you've been patient for me. And I'd ask that you help me to communicate to the people that you want me to serve. Help all of us to die to ourselves, to serve others, and most importantly, in doing so, that we are serving you. And Lord, I ask that you be with Don Johnson and his family. I ask that you be with Tom, continue to strengthen him, help him with forgiveness. Be with the folks in Alabama with the tornado. Be with our friend in Alaska as he's working through bitterness, and just all those that are in relationships, and all those who are seeking mates and dating. Help us all to recognize, Lord, that you've given us the recipe, the guidebook, the path, that you are with us, and truth will ultimately prevail, and give us all the strength to be 100% honest with ourselves, with you. And for those that we are courting or dating or getting to know, is just be forthright and honest, and have relationships with others that are pleasing to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, as you can see, I pretty much wear the same pants all the time. I'll wash this pair of pants, maybe in another month. And this shirt, maybe it's time to wash it. I had some friends up from Georgia this weekend, and they were up for I guess 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Wednesday I realized I'd worn the same shirt the whole 3 days they were here. So yeah, I'm kind of a slob. So I mean, maybe that's one thing that I would suggest some of you out there is, take a shower. And I haven't showered in a few days. I've been going in the bath or into the lake and doing a polar plunge. So that kind of constitutes a bath for me as far as I'm concerned. So that's my advice to you men. Take a shower, change your clothes. I might even put on some deodorant this weekend. I don't know. I don't do it very often, but yeah, die to yourself and meet your wives, meet your family where they are, and give them the same love that God's given you. So until then, let the Spirit lead, and as always, trust the guide.